I'm Andrei.
Hi, I'm Reta.
We are here at Consonance studio in Timișoara, Romania, and we just finished shooting a little drumhead experiment.
The experiment consisting in recording different types of snare heads on a snare drum. The snare drum that we used was a Ludwig Supraphonic. It was 14 by 6.5. It was a newer edition of a Ludwig snare drum, not a vintage one. Also, the snare heads were a mix of 9 different Evans snare heads. Some of them more familiar to drummers, other a bit more exotic, but all of them were snare heads that we wanted to experiment with. It's also important to mention that we are not endorsed by any drum company. We just wanted to do this video with the purpose of starting a dialogue. If you have any kind of tips or advices or maybe other gear that we want to use in future videos, please leave a comment in the comment section.
We used 3 tunings. We used a low, medium and high tuning, what we call them. We used the tune bot, so each drum head is tuned to the exact same value. We also used an ultra high or an ultra low tuning where we saw fit. And we'll have all the values and all the gear that we used to record this in the description below.
Also, it's important to mention that both of us recorded in this experiment. We are 2 different types of drummers with 2 different types of beats, and I think this is important to the end result of the experiment. We will show you the first batch of videos and what we recorded, and after that we will come with our impressions regarding how the drum felt inside the room, but also how we reacted in the recording.
Okay, see ya.
And we're back. I want to start off by mentioning that this is a purely subjective opinion on my part, at least on my feedback, and it's also coming from somebody that's been playing Ludwig supraphonic for the past 7 years. I really love this snare drum. For me, it's very versatile. I mainly play hard rock, heavy rock, but also with some maybe more jazzy influences. So for me, this snare drum is perfect. In the past maybe 3 or 4 years, I've been using the Evans HD Dry on it, because I always felt that it cuts off those overtones for Ludwig, and it's easier while touring to get a faster, cleaner snare sound. But this experiment really changed a lot of opinions I had on snare heads, and really I'm just gonna go through them as in the order that were presented in the video. And the first snare head was the G1 Evans G1 Clear, which for me was an absolute surprise, and I was super excited about this snare drum because it gave such a different vibe to the Ludwig, and I don't know, I think it has a lot of different uses in different genres, maybe more electronic, also industrial metal maybe, or something like that. But it gives a really interesting vibe, and I would recommend trying it out. Maybe you'll love it. It's also important to mention that our opinion is also based maybe on two different things: what we felt inside the room and what was coming here from the speakers. And maybe some of the differences are very subtle, exactly, very subtle between the snare heads. But inside the room, the differences were really mind-blowing. So I think I really recommend using the G1 Clear, maybe just as an experiment. I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. The next one, G1 Coated, was actually my favorite. I always kind of was fearful of this snare head because of the overtones you usually get on the Ludwig, and that's why I mentioned I use the HD Dry. But I don't know, maybe with using the tune bot and always having this controlled tuning, I loved it. I really loved it, and I think it has that warm vintage sound. Overall, it's I think the most focused from all the coated let's say more standard snare heads, and I loved it. The medium and the high tuning was great. I think it's the snare sound for me, at least in my subjective opinion. The next one was the G2 Coated, which I'm gonna go really fast through. I think it's a bit dirtier, a bit murkier than the G1 Coated, at least in the room. You could also feel a little bit on the recording as well, but it has some dirtier overtones. I think it has a little less control, but most of drummers already know this G1, G2 debate on Ludwig, at least with a lot of I talk to. For me, that being stuck in this HD Dry kind of tunnel, it was something really interesting to see.
Important to mention, I say, with the G2, when we put it on after the G1, when we tuned it, we really expected to have more solid, more focused sound than the G1, but what we found in the room is that it was really all over. The tuning was a bit harder, and while on the mic, I think the differences are really subtle. Maybe the G2 has much more uses when you record it, but in the room, it really felt all over the place, especially compared to the G1.
Yeah, and this experiment really helped us a lot, because we talked a lot about it before starting it, and regarding a lot of snare heads, the result was really unexpected for many of them. Also, regarding how easy were some of the snare heads to tune, and how hard they were to tune. Like the UV1 was really easy to tune, but it was kind of high and kind of I don't know, not so dense of a sound as you would have at a G1. And personally, I didn't like it so much because I felt kind of this whole power of the metal from the Ludwig didn't really transpire in the room. It was kind of, the sound felt a bit lost. From what I understand, these are very durable, but I don't know if I will use them anytime soon.
They also felt a bit choked when you play them. The UV1 and also the UV2, while they are more durable, they have a bit of a funny feeling when you lay the stick on them. And I think the more standard one, like the G1 coated, is as you would expect a head to feel. But a UV1 and UV2 have a bit of a sketchy feeling, and it might take some adjustment.
Yes. Also the UV2, like the snares were like over the top inside the room. It was like really loud and really out of control. That's the thing I will say. Next one was the Calftone, which was, I don't know, really weird choice for me, but it was really reliable as a sound. It was pretty crisp, pretty focused. I actually enjoyed it. One thing to mention is that I used the Calftone for a while on the Ludwig after this experiment, and the durability is really strange. After a few sessions, you'll see that you have a number of waves on the center of the snare drum, which never happened personally to me on any other snare head I ever used. So durability might be a problem, but Andrei can tell us more about the Calftone.
It was my personal favorite. The Calftone is the one that I enjoyed the most. I felt it had the roundest attack, it was a nice character and a bit of a different one. Again, in the mic maybe it's a bit more subtle, but when you're in the room you really hear the character of each drum head, which is why we also recommend you to go out and try maybe 2 or 3 heads. Maybe you liked 2 or 3 from these, try them out yourself and see that maybe the difference are a bit bigger when you try them out yourself.
Also, it's very important to mention that we did not mess with the tuning of the Rezo head. Also, we did not mess a lot with the tightness of the snares. It was just maybe a little bit of adjustment if the snares were really choked or really over the top. To have as the best result, the comparison result as possible, we tried to not mess around with all these variables too much. The thing is that it really, what surprised us was the fact that the snare heads influenced the snares so much. It was one of the things that we were really shocked to see, but also like maybe those notes that are maybe not on pitch that the snares usually have, if they have like a overtone, and some of them are more dissonant than the other, even though it's the same tuning, like we calculated again and again on, and it really influenced a lot the snares.
Yeah, we were really surprised by the tuning of the top head and how much just even the tuning, or also the same tuning but different snare top heads, really influenced the snares a lot. We really were surprised that we didn't make big adjustments. We wanted to be a kind of a fair comparison to the heads rather than us tweaking with every possible setting. But I do think that maybe we could have gotten some better results with some heads if we had messed a bit more with the snare wires.
Yeah, so if you will hear maybe some overtones, strange overtones, take in consideration the fact that we just wanted to see how the snare's head sounds if we just put it on the drum and play it. Maybe we also need to mention the reverse dot, which was really one of the snare heads I wanted to try a lot, and was such a different experience of playing the drums. The reverse dot was definitely the loudest one. It was instantly, the room was really filled with a lot of sound, and if you want that, I think for really heavy rock metal, I think it could go really well with your playing. Also, it has a nice feeling on the hand when you play faster, or when you need a lot of rebound. I think it's also something that's really interesting to try.
Also, it looks kind of cool. It was also my favorite head after the Calftone, just because of the looks. I really think it looks stunning.
Yeah, and I think it's really a controlled snare head.
And also, sorry, this is the first head that we thought that could take a really low tuning, and this is the only one that we did the ultra low for. We really thought it still had kind of a note, while the other drum heads, we tried to see them at lower tunings, but they didn't produce any note or any usable.
Yeah, at least in the room, because personally I've seen many times, especially in stoner rock or doom bands, during sound check, while hearing the snare drum like completely acoustic, that it sounded exactly how we say it, not a recordable note there, but I don't know, recorded with a mic, it kind of sounded something there. But here with this reverse dot, you could really use that. It was really nice. So it was really controlled snare head. I really recommend also experimenting with this one. The last two ones were the Genera HD, which I really did not like at all. I think it was like some really weird overtones, a lot of dissonant frequencies there, and I personally I felt the snare became weak, and it wasn't really that interesting.
And what we expected, again, going from the maybe G1 coded, we thought that maybe the Genera HD would be a middle ground between the G1 coded and the HD dry. Yeah. But it was definitely not that. It was very chaotic, and also it choked the drum in very strange ways that we did not expect.
Yes. Lastly, we're talking about the HD dry. I was really curious, and I kind of intentionally left this snare head at the end, because I was really curious to see how it felt coming back to the snare head. It's a snare head I've been using for the last 3 or 4 years, and I was really excited when I discovered it, because you all know that the Ludwig has those overtones, which in some cases are great, in some cases are awful, depending on the room, depending on the situation, depending on what band you're playing in. And the HD dry, I think, is very versatile. It cuts a lot of the sound, but it's a good sound. At least in my opinion, it was a really good sound, the sound that I loved, because you don't need any muffling for it. And I was really surprised, because going through all of this, I did not enjoy the HD dry so much anymore. Maybe it was because this time we could have controlled really good the tuning, and personally I'm gonna go back to the G1. Maybe mess up also with the G1 clear in some conditions, but I don't know. I feel that the HD dry, although it has some really important and interesting usage, especially in touring, or especially if you don't have a lot of time to tweak your snare drum. Maybe you have an old Ludwig which has problems with the lugs and the snares. I mean, Ludwigs do tend to have these kind of problems. I think is great, but recording wise, I'm really gonna go with the G1 coated.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's a classic, maybe it's safe, but I sincerely liked it the best.
It really depends, I think. If you want to embrace more the character of the drum, and you can afford to have a ringier drum in your, maybe have like spacier music, you can have space for nice, loud, ringing snare, but maybe the HD dry is a bit more controlled. It's a really reliable head. It has been our standard for the past years that we used live, but now coming back after all these tests, I think we liked it really not as much as we expected it to like it, because it really cuts a lot of the character of the drum, at least of the Ludwig Superphonic. We will try it out on some other snares.
In the future we will try out some different snares. Also we're going to try different types of muffling. Of course, in a studio situation you can mess up with so many things regarding the snare sound. You can use or don't use muffling, or to tweak so many things, but we just wanted to take this as a basis to future experiments. and I really agree with Andrei with what he said. It's really interesting that after this experiment he recorded a grindcore album and he used the Calftone on the recording, which really I don't think is the go-to solution to extreme drummers really, but I mean, I heard what it came out and it sounds great. So it's really, I think, you have to go and experiment and find your own sound and find what you like, and nobody's gonna give you the recipe for any drum sound that sounds great. Just, I don't know. So
yeah, well,
yeah.
We're gonna play the second batch with the more blast beat kind of fast stuff. We'll come back with some more impressions, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so here we are for the final segment of the video. You heard some blast beats. I think that for the most part, you can do away with most of the drum heads, especially in the higher tuning. Maybe even some in medium. Maybe the crack is more pronounced for some drum heads in the medium zone, but I guess that they will shine at high tunings. Well, this wasn't a very fast blast beat. It definitely is on the limit. I mean, a lot of the heads had a lot of overtones that lasted for longer than the note. And if you were to play even faster, most of the notes that you would play would get a bit confused. You wouldn't know exactly where the note started and ended. I'm not going to talk about all the heads, but I do think that some in particular were really good. Like, I think that the EC1 reverse dot really shined. It is very loud, so even if you play blast beats with a lower dynamic or lower volume, I think it will be much easier to be heard, especially in a live situation. I think that while on the recording you don't hear that as much, I think that the EC1 reverse dot really had a much cleaner sound. It was really controlled and it had a nice feeling. It has a nice bouncy feeling that you could really harness for the blast beats.
Why did you choose the Calftone for recording a grind?
Yeah, so I really wanted, I think that the Calftone wasn't the most controlled of them all. It was a bit chaotic in the blast beat area, but I really wanted a different character and a different vibe. That it really, I think, out of all the drums, the ones that stood out to most of us as being different were, I think, the EC1 reverse dot, the Calftone, and the HD dry, of course, which is all the others kind of have a nice familiar sound to them, most of them at least.
Yeah, it has a more unique tone, I guess. And maybe it's helpful to say that I used the Calftone in a tour for like maybe 6 consecutive shows. And what I can say is that unfortunately it becomes harder and harder to tune. And as I mentioned before, it develops those waves that I've never ever seen before. I'm not the most hard-hitting drummer ever, but I'm also not very soft on the drums. So that really was a surprise. But what can I say regarding the live shows in big rooms? That high-end hum frequency really kind of got to be bigger. Like for example, the first show, I was like really surprised by that really high ping when you had that crack. And from what I've heard of the recording and also talking to my sound engineer, that really high pitched note did not translate in the audience, or at least at the folk. So I don't know. At least as a playing experience, unfortunately, the Calftone has very short life in enjoying it.
Also in the studio, I really felt that while I as well am not a very hard-hitting drummer, it was degrading a little bit faster than all the others. And of course, maybe the Calftone was designed as more of a vintage kind of jazzy drum head where you would not hit as hard. But I do think that is a problem. And we haven't tested all of the drum heads to see for a few months how they behave, or even a few weeks or a few shows. But I do think that the UVs are really durable. And while they sound different and feel different in the room, I think that under the mic, they really, you have a lot of variety in choosing how to process them later and choosing a kind of a sound. And maybe if you are a really hard-hitting drummer and you don't want to concern yourself with changing heads all too much, I think maybe the UVs are a better choice.
Yeah. Also with the Calftone, what was really interesting when we put it back on the Ludwig, because while testing all these different snare heads, we put them on back and forth. Mostly for the tests, they were like pristine. It was first hit, but after for using them in like real life situation, not for this experiment. After we put it back on, it was like really strange to put it and actually get rid of those waves, which when you tuned it medium to high, you could not see them. Now I still have it on my snare drum, and now even at medium tuning, they're pretty there. But back then, when we put it back, when we tuned it to a medium tuning, they disappeared. But that was really strange. I've never seen a snare head behave this way before. So that's to take in consideration, especially if you are on tour and you don't have a drum tech or whatever, somebody to change your drum heads like every 2 or 3 shows.
Or you can't afford it if
or
you
you
want
can't
to go.
afford it. I would not go with Calftone, although when it's pristine, it sounds really good, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I also think that for most things, if you really want to go for that really grindcore funny kind of vibe, I really think that again the EC1 R in the ultra high tuning really has that ping that you get to hear on a lot of grindcore records. Of course, that is a taste thing. You can.
Yeah. And also, I think it has applications in like industrial genres. Like I could definitely hear it on a 9 Inch Nails record or something like that. I think where you don't care about how much debris is coming from the snare, and because it's so loud, how much you need to compress it afterwards or whatever. I think it's really cool. I mean, it's definitely something else. It's not your usual. This is the Bonham Ludwig snare. So I'm really curious to see how it fits with different snares.
Of course, while we all talked about this all these heads that we tried, all the tunings, everything, this was our opinion, our experience in this space. Maybe if we would have gone to a bigger room with a lot more reverb, we would have chosen other heads that we really liked. But in this room, in this recording situation, and with the experience that we have, these are our tastes and this is what we chose. But
yes,
we are, of course, open to hear what you think about all of these.
Yeah.
And
also, Andrei can maybe give you better input on what gear was used to record this experiment.
of course, we put them in the description below so you can see every little minute detail. But we really chose the Ludwig Supraphonic. We had another snare, a Gavin Harrison Protean snare, that we could have chosen. We said if we are going to do the experiment and really want to learn ourselves and also do something for the internet, I think we decided that the Ludwig Supraphonic was a more
general use.
Yeah,
general
people are
use.
accustomed to the Ludwig Supraphonic. Yeah. You hear it on a lot of records, you hear it live a lot. And we chose the SM57 as the microphone, which is again the industry standard, especially for snare drum, in every genre, every situation, even live.
It's also important, I think, to mention that we did not mix.
No, these are all
master,
completely raw.
Any kind of sound on it. So if maybe it sounds a bit funky to you, it's basically because of the fact that we just wanted to put it as it is. Of course, if we started to tweak it, then we could have, I don't know, made them sound better, and I don't think that's the point. Just to have like a good sound, as good a sound as you can get from a clean channel, you know, without.
Yeah, we just did a few tests, a few run-throughs. We put the mics, went straight into the preamps, no compression, no EQ, only a bit of level adjustment of each channel, but absolutely no reverb, no compression. They're as raw as you can get in a recording situation. And that's why we even thought to make this discussion and not just show you the basic clips, like half an hour of drum playing, because we really think that recording is one thing, and we captured some of the vibe of them while they were recorded. But in the room, there's something different, and maybe on another room with another mic setup, with another drummer, you could have gotten completely different tones out of the same drum head, same tunings.
Of course, I think in conclusion is the fact that such a small element in drum constellation can change so much of how it inspires you to play, because I personally felt so different while playing all these different snare heads, some most than others, but like for example the G1 Clear for me was like, I don't know, like the ideas flowing in that moment while hitting it, and like what I wanted to try playing were so different on that one compared to the G1 Coated, for example. So I think this is such an important message in the end, I think, to say is that you have to try it by yourself and let it inspire you.
Yeah, don't take these things for granted. You can always mess with the tuning, always try to change something. We just changed the snare top heads. We could have just as easily changed even just the bottom snare tension, bottom head. If we raise the drum higher, maybe we need a different tension. We really, we know that, but we didn't want to have too many variables. We just wanted to see what happens if we just change one element, just the snare top head. In the future, we want to experiment more with different rims and different snare wires, different maybe snare bottom heads, snare bottom tuning interval as to the snare top, different sticks, muffling. These are all really small parts that you can change, and you can have pretty much infinite tweakability with just the snare top head.
Yes, because in the end, in the studio, maybe you can tweak it further, like here at the desk, but while you're playing, it can make so much difference if you find your own voice into playing what you feel is in your head, what you're hearing in your head and inside you, and these really minute things can make such a big difference.
So, in conclusion, we really did this for learning for ourselves. We hope that you learned something as well. We really went with some expectations into some of these drum heads, but really we changed drastically once we set the head and we realized, oh, we expected something to happen, it's completely something different happened.
Yeah. So if you have any kind of questions regarding further details of what we've done, please don't hesitate to contact us via whatever this video will be posted on Medium, probably YouTube, Facebook, whatever. And also give us some feedback regarding if this video makes any sense to you, or should we do something different, and in the future what should we test, what are the most hard questions,
burning questions that you have. We really want to learn ourselves, and we would really appreciate some feedback from you. And also let us know which are your top 3 favorite drum heads. We really want to know your tunings and your drum heads. Maybe you have different tastes, maybe where you listen to them you have different.
Also from our experiment, but also from your experience, so that would be nice. So thanks for watching.
See you next time.
Sure. Cheers.